It's PFT OT, the new show that we have begun to create after the conclusion of Pro Football Talk Live every Monday through Friday. Chris Sims is now here 4 days a week. That leaves me all alone on Friday. But you know what? I'm not alone. I always have Stats, and Stats is here to help me through the topics that we want to expand upon, that we address during the program, or things that we didn't get to, because there's always more happening in the NFL than 3 hours of a show can hold. So, Stats, let's start with just kind of the craziness that transpired as it relates to the Antonio Brown possible trade to the Bills, non-trade to the Bills. From my perspective, I went to bed on a rare weeknight before midnight. I was asleep when the Antonio Brown stuff initially broke. My son tried to text me. I didn't hear my phone. At 3 a.m., I did hear my phone from a source saying this trade is not happening. And then this morning in real time, while we're on the air, Ian Rappaport, who initially reported it, he doubles down and says it's going to happen. Others are saying it's not going to happen. The Bills eventually come out and say it's not going to happen. What was your experience with this thing? Because you get up right around 3 a.m. What was your first notice of it? And just give me a feel for what you kind of went through as the hours unfolded, because it was a fairly small window of time in the grand scheme of things that went from a trade being close to no trade happening at all.
It was the weirdest story I've ever seen, especially considering the time it all unfolded. 11:28 was the initial tweet from Ian Rappaport that the deal was close, that it was going to get done. And by 7:03, the story was over because Schefter tweeted the Brandon Beane statement saying that the Bills were out of it. I've never had a story evolve like it was the first thing I saw when I woke up this morning after I turned off my alarm, and it changed 6 times, I feel like, until 7:03.
And then when we're talking about it in the opening segment of the simulcast in that 7 a.m. Eastern hour, and I'm prepared for 2 hours to constantly be monitoring everything that's happening, and I was getting texts in real time. I was trying to chase down information in real time. Brandon Beane, the Bills GM, issues this statement just pulling the plug on all of this, and I think that was smart to do. Issue the statement. It went to multiple reporters, pulling the plug on the idea that they're talking about trading for Antonio Brown, because you don't want your fan base to get too caught up in this. You don't want your fan base to be confused. You don't want them to be disappointed if they spend all morning thinking this is going to happen and finding out it's not. It's better to nip it in the bud before anybody even wakes up on Friday morning. So I thought we were going to have 2 full hours of what's happening with Antonio Brown and the Bills. I thought we may have to go live between 9 to 11 a.m. Eastern on NBCSN to continue to monitor this, because the 2 hours of us trying to figure out what the hell was going to happen were potentially going to be superseded by something happening between 9 and 11. So as it stands, by 10 minutes after 7 a.m. Eastern on Friday, it was over. So the life cycle went from 11:28 p.m. Eastern on Thursday night until 7:10 p.m. Eastern on Friday morning. During that period of time, Antonio Brown possibly was on the verge of becoming a Buffalo Bill. And I think I need to write this. I think yesterday was the 10-year anniversary of Terrell Owens becoming a member of the Buffalo Bills. I think it was.
Oh, man.
That makes this. I think it was. I think I saw some tweets to that effect yesterday. So very fitting, because this Antonio Brown thing in Pittsburgh is the closest thing to T.O. in Philadelphia since T.O. in Philadelphia back in 2005. All right. Now, the question becomes, with the Bills out of the mix, where does the trade process go from here? I am told, I haven't written this yet at PFT because we've been, doing the show today. I'm told that there are several teams that are interested, and they're waiting for the price to go down. And Big Cat had an idea that even though the 49ers have said they're not interested, or they said they haven't inquired, maybe they're playing poker here. Maybe they're just holding back and waiting for that price to go down, and then they'll know when to jump in. It's almost like when to make your move for the frozen concentrated orange juice in trading places, right? When's the time to buy? They're waiting to say buy, and maybe they're going to wait. And maybe if it goes down to a 2 or a 3, maybe that's where the 49ers or other teams get involved. So there are several teams waiting for the Steelers to move off of that demand for a first-round pick, Stats. And how would you feel about the 49ers, your favorite team, acquiring Antonio Brown?
Well, it depends what they give up, right? We always talk about, hey, everyone's available if you offer enough in return, right? Well, I think the reverse is also true. You don't want Antonio Brown unless you're only going to give up, a 4th, a 5th, or a 6th. Or at some point, the deal becomes too good to refuse, right?
Well, at some point, you just have to say, look, if you're committed to getting rid of him, And if you're the 40, either side of it, right, if the price drops, you say, yes, I got to do it. And for the Steelers, if you're committed to get rid of him at some point, somebody says, yes, we'll give you something that you can take and save face and get out of here. And, I was making the case yesterday that they could still get a first-round pick if there's enough shuffling on the back end that makes it not really a first-round pick, right? If the Raiders send a first-round pick and the Steelers give back a third-round pick, that's really not a first-round pick. Even if it's a fourth-round pick, that really undermines the first-round pick. And one of the points Peter King made a few years ago on the program, or a few weeks ago rather, the idea that this is a draft that has a lot of heft in the middle rounds. Maybe something like that would be good. Maybe that's how you get your first rounder. Hey, you get your first rounder, but you give back a third-round pick or a fourth-round pick, and then maybe the Raiders would throw on a fifth-round pick on top of it. Something complicated that would take away from the idea that they got less than a first-round pick. Because you'd see that first-round pick, and you'd say, hey, the Steelers got their first-round pick. But when you really break it down, they really didn't get a first-round pick because they ended up giving up more on the back end. That may be a way for them to save face. The problem is they want to get this done. And I don't know that they have the luxury of time necessary to shape a creative option like that. But, again, several teams are waiting for the price to go down. Right now, the Steelers are still holding firm for that first-round pick, and it makes it a very tough trade to do because you've got to make the Steelers happy, you've got to make Brown happy, and Brown's going to want a new contract. He's going to want to play for that team. It's a lot of factors that need to come together. One of the teams that has been linked to Antonio Brown from time to time, the Green Bay Packers. And stats, a case of ESPN on ESPN crime this morning. Diana Rossini says the Packers are involved and interested. Rob Domofsky, who covers the Packers for ESPN, says they're not and they never were. I feel like this is the kind of move that Packers fans have been waiting for, that they think they're going to get from Brian Gutekunst as the GM. I feel like it's not going to move in that direction, and I just wonder whether or not Aaron Rodgers is the kind of guy who would want someone like Antonio Brown around. Because, look, if there was some tension between Ben Roethlisberger and Antonio Brown, chances are at some point there's going to be tension between Rodgers and Brown.
First of all, you better be careful because apparently it's a rough day for insiders, so just watch yourself, Mike. But what better way would there be for the Packers to announce that the era of quote-unquote Mike McCarthy wasting Aaron Rodgers is over than by making a huge move and giving Aaron Rodgers probably the best weapon he's ever had?
It would be great. It would be perfect from a football standpoint. I just wonder if the factors that came into play in Pittsburgh would rear their ugly head in Green Bay and make for tension, make for drama, make for dysfunction, and cut against what the Packers are currently trying to do. And Matt LaFleur has already got his hands full with that locker room. He's a nice guy. I worry, though, that he doesn't have that. And I don't say you have to be fire and brimstone because Tony Dungy doesn't have that, and he's able to take over a locker room. I just wonder, and I hope for Matt LaFleur's sake, he can take over a locker room. But you already have Aaron Rodgers in there. You throw Antonio Brown on top of it, it may be more than a new head coach who has only been a coordinator for 1 year before becoming a head coach can ever handle.
Do you think that
Kyler Murray?
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to jump you. Do you think that Rodgers is the kind of quarterback that could help keep AB in line and say, hey, look, if you don't fall in, I'll bury you in this offense?
But you got Antonio Brown saying they got to play it by my rules now. That's the problem. You have to kind of be ready to tiptoe around Antonio Brown. You can't play tough with him. Then it ends up being the same debacle it would be if he ended up being a member of the New England Patriots. So I just think that's why the Packers shouldn't be interested, because it adds a dynamic at a time when, and we talked about this yesterday, coaches, new coaches, guys who are just on the job now, they got enough to deal with than trying to figure out how to tiptoe around Antonio Brown so he's happy as a member of his new team. It's been a rough week for Kyler Murray. Not that he's had anything to do, but he's been the subject of so much discussion and combine interviews. And is he faking his height? I don't know how you would even do that. And Charlie Casserly turning this into a national tour of radio stations with negativity about Kyler Murray's ability, and is he prepared for these interviews? And by the way, Charlie Casserly has a side hustle where he prepares people for combine interviews. It was just a strange, bizarre week. And I don't know how you deal with it if you're Kyler Murray. His agent, Eric Burkhart, was extremely upset. I heard from him directly. But for Kyler Murray, look, I guess this just gets you ready for the week in and week out life of a franchise quarterback in the NFL, because from time to time, you are going to be the guy who's at the center of attention.
Think of all the things that Kyler Murray has done to prepare for this moment in his life, right? And it's going to a key part of this apparently is going to be him having to get weighed and measured again. I mean, doesn't that seem a bit ridiculous to you, Mike?
And you have to wonder. I know he said he's all in with football. Could this and is the method to the madness here that the NFL is collectively testing him to see, like, hey, if you still want to play football after dealing with all this crap over the last 2 months, then you really must love football, right? I mean, that's how they deal with all the low-level grunts in front offices and coaching staffs. They put you in there and they work the hell out of you, and those who survive, those are the ones who kind of, they show that they love it, because they're getting no money or next to no money, and they're busting their asses. And, maybe this is the Kyler Murray, almost kind of like an indoctrination, the hazing of Kyler Murray to make sure he truly loves football. And there's a chance, I guess, at one point he says, man, baseball never put me through all this crap. Maybe I should play baseball instead.
Is there going to be, are we going to look back on this the same way we look back on some of the other sort of quote-unquote issues with other great quarterbacks like Dan Marino? Remember the Steelers were all unsure about whether they should take Dan Marino because there was rumors about his habits off the field. And if Kyler Murray is great, none of this is going to matter, right?
Right, and I'll say what I've been saying for weeks now. It's better to guess wrong in this climate with a guy that you take and he ends up being a bust than to guess wrong by leaving him on the shelf and having him become a star for someone else, because the financial burden isn't what it used to be. 10, 11 years ago, you take a quarterback number 1 overall and he's a bust, you are screwed. And there was actually talk 10 years ago about teams with the high picks in the draft passing so they wouldn't have to pay that huge money on top of taking that risk, because it compounds the risk. You want to go safer with your top pick in the draft because you're going to tie up so much cash in that guy that if he's a bust, it sets you back. And then you're back in that spot again, and you have another player that's got this huge chunk of salary cap space under the former rookie wage compensation system. So now it's less. It's like $25-26 million on a 4-year deal combined. That's not a bad financial risk to take if you end up getting a stud, a star player, a guy who's going to transcend your franchise. And that's why I think it's worth taking the risk. I think the Cardinals, they need to do the work, and maybe they'll find something that makes them hesitant, but I think they should ultimately take Kyler Murray, because if he is your Baker Mayfield, if he is your Patrick Mahomes, then that turns the franchise around and it makes the franchise relevant. One last thing before we wrap up this edition of PFT OT. David Irving, clearly done with the NFL, suspended indefinitely. He was on Instagram smoking marijuana, and he said, I'm done with the NFL. And look, that's what will happen. When you put this much pressure on these guys to choose football over marijuana, if this is something that they do, that they choose to do, that they want to do, especially if they're in a state where it's legal, it's unfortunate. And sometimes it's going to come to this point where guys are going to say, screw it. I'm done playing football. I don't want to do it anymore. I don't want to change my habits. Why should I have to? What relevance does this have to my football career? And hopefully this David Irving example stats will be the thing that gets the NFL to say, we have to get out of the marijuana business.
Well, isn't that, we just saw this week that there was a report that the NFL is prepared to make major concessions. I mean, is David Irving, hanging him up too early here?
Stats, it was my report.
Yeah.
Stats.
So you're aware of it.
You saw the report. Yes, I am aware of it. It's my report.
So what's the problem?
Could be, but we're still maybe a year or two away from that happening. So we'll see. We'll see. But and maybe what will happen is anybody who's been suspended for marijuana use gets a free pass to come back if they take away the marijuana prohibition. I don't know what they're going to do when it comes down to that, but maybe that's where we go. So, all right, I got to wrap this up. I got to do some radio down in Miami. Stats, thank you for sitting in for PFT OT. Again, it's something we're going to try to do every weekday, especially when Sims is around. And remember, Chris Sims is now with us 4 days a week. He does his Chris Sims Unbuttoned podcast 3 days a week. You'll see him on PFT Live. You'll see him on the Unbuttoned podcast, and you'll see clips from his appearances on PFT Live, PFT OT, and Unbuttoned on ProFootballTalk.com. Have a great weekend. We'll see you on Monday.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.